Blood trickled down Beatrice O'Malley's face as she clutched her swollen belly, cowering in the corner of the Lordsburg, New Mexico train depot. The late autumn wind of 1887 howled through the broken window, bringing with it the scent of dust, sagebrush, and the promise of an early winter. But none of these concerned her as much as the footsteps disappearing into the night. "He's gone," she whispered to herself, finally allowing the tears to fall. At 22 years old, 6 months pregnant, and now utterly alone in a strange town, Beatrice felt her last threads of hope slipping away. Her wedding ring, along with what little money she'd possessed, had been stolen by the man who'd promised to love her forever, the same man who just left her bruised and bleeding on the depot floor. The train that had dropped them off had departed hours ago, continuing west toward California. The station agent had closed up for the night, not noticing the woman who had stayed behind in the shadows with her husband. Now that same husband was gone, and Beatrice knew he wasn't coming back. A particularly violent gust of wind extinguished the lone lantern outside the depot window, plunging the small waiting area into darkness. Beatrice tightened her arms around herself, her thin dress offering little protection against the cold. Her baby kicked, as if sensing her distress, and she rubbed her belly in a futile attempt at reassurance. "We'll be all right," she whispered, though the words rang hollow even to her own ears. The bruises forming on her face and arms told a different story, as did the painful twinge in her side where Gregory's boots had landed. She prayed the baby wasn't harmed. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her shrink further into the corner. Had Gregory returned? Fear paralyzed her as the steps grew louder, then stopped just outside. The door to the depot creaked open, sending a shaft of moonlight across the wooden floor. "Hello," a deep voice called. "Station's closed till morning, but I thought I saw someone through the window." Beatrice held her breath, trying to make herself invisible in the shadows. But the stranger struck a match, lighting a lantern he carried, and the warm glow illuminated the small room, including her huddled form. For a moment, the tall silhouette just stood there, taking in the sight of her. Then he stepped forward, and in the lamplight, Beatrice could see him clearly. A tall man with broad shoulders, a weathered face, and eyes that widened with concern when they fell on her battered face. "My God," he breathed, setting the lantern down carefully. "What happened to you, madam?" She couldn't answer, her throat too tight with fear and shame. The man took another step, then stopped when she flinched. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said softly, removing his hat to reveal dark hair streaked with the earliest threads of silver at the temples. He looked to be in his early 30s, with a face that had seen its share of sun and hardship. "I'm Isaac Donovan. I work the Rocking D Ranch outside town." When she still didn't respond, he crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "You're hurt, and—" His eyes dropped to her belly, in no condition to be alone out here, temperatures dropping fast tonight. As if to emphasize his point, another gust of wind rattled the windows. Beatrice shivered involuntarily. "My husband," she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "He left me here." Isaac's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "After doing this to you?" She nodded slightly, wincing at the pain the movement caused. Without another word, Isaac Donovan shrugged out of his heavy duster coat. It was worn but clean, lined with wool and still warm from his body. With slow, deliberate movements, he stepped forward and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders. "I don't usually make a habit of picking up strays at the train depot," he said with the faintest hint of a smile, "but I reckon tonight's an exception. There's a doctor in town who won't mind being woken up for this, and my sister runs a boarding house with a spare room. What do you say?" The unexpected kindness broke something in Beatrice. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks as she clutched the warm coat around her body. "Why would you help me?" she whispered. "You don't even know me." Isaac's expression grew serious. "Madam, where I come from, you don't leave a wounded creature to suffer, and you sure as hell don't leave a lady in your condition alone in the cold." He paused, then added simply, "It ain't right." After a moment's hesitation, Beatrice nodded. What choice did she have? She couldn't stay here, and she had nowhere else to go. "My name is Beatrice," she said softly. "Beatrice O'Malley." "Well, Miss Beatrice," Isaac said, offering his hand, "let's get you somewhere safe." When she placed her trembling fingers in his calloused palm, she had no way of knowing that this chance encounter at Lordsburg Depot would change both their lives forever. Isaac helped her to her feet with careful, respectful hands. He was mindful of her condition, supporting her weight without making her feel helpless. "My horse is outside," he explained. "Can you ride? It's not far to town." Beatrice nodded. "I grew up riding," she admitted, "though it's been some months now." Isaac led her outside where a large chestnut gelding waited patiently. The night air bit at her exposed skin, making the warmth of his coat all the more precious. She clutched it tightly around herself as Isaac adjusted the stirrups. "I'll help you up, then climb on behind you," he said. "That way you won't fall." With surprising gentleness for such a large man, Isaac lifted Beatrice onto the saddle, then mounted behind her. His presence at her back was solid and secure without being threatening. He reached around her to take the reins, creating a protective circle with his arms. "All right?" he asked near her ear. "Yes," she replied, though everything in her life was far from all right. They rode slowly through the darkness toward the main part of Lordsburg. The town was mostly quiet at this late hour, with only a few establishments still showing lights in their windows. Isaac guided the horse down the main street, past the saloon where raucous laughter spilled out into the night, and toward a modest house set slightly apart from the others, where a single lamp burned in the window. "Doc Mitchell," Isaac explained, dismounting and then helping Beatrice down. "Good man. Served as a surgeon during the war." He knocked firmly on the door, keeping one hand supportively under Beatrice's elbow. After a moment, footsteps approached, and the door swung open to reveal a white-haired man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Donovan," he said gruffly, then his eyes fell on Beatrice. His expression immediately changed. "Bring her in." Isaac guided Beatrice into a tidy front room that served as the doctor's waiting area. Through a doorway, she could see an examination table and cabinets of medical supplies. "Found her at the depot," Isaac explained tersely. "Her husband left her there after working her over pretty good. She's expecting." Dr. Mitchell's kind eyes surveyed Beatrice's injuries with professional detachment. "Let's have a look at you, young lady." For the next half hour, the doctor gently examined Beatrice's injuries. Isaac stepped outside during the more intimate portions of the examination, but remained close by, his presence somehow reassuring even through the closed door. "You're fortunate, doctor," Mitchell finally said, applying a salve to the cut on her cheekbone. "The baby seems unharmed. You've got some nasty bruising, especially on your ribs, but nothing's broken. I want you to rest, though. No strenuous activity for at least a week." Beatrice nodded, pulling Isaac's coat back around her shoulders. "I don't have any money to pay you," she admitted shamefully. Dr. Mitchell waved away her concern. "Isaac and I have an arrangement. He brings in his ranch hands when they need patching up, and I get the finest beef in the territory." "Consider it covered." Isaac reappeared in the doorway. "How is she, Doc?" "She'll mend," the doctor replied, "but she needs proper rest and good food. That baby's counting on it." Isaac nodded. "My sister's place, then. Sarah will know what to do." The ride to the boarding house was short. Unlike the doctor's home, This building was completely dark. Isaac tied his horse to the hitching post and escorted Beatrice to the door. Sarah might be a bit prickly at being woken, he warned with a small smile, but she's got a good heart under all that vinegar. Indeed, the woman who answered the door after several knocks looked ready to deliver a scolding until she saw Beatrice's condition. Sarah Donovan was a tall, lean woman with the same dark hair as her brother, though hers was pulled back in a severe bun. Her expression softened immediately. "Isaac Donovan, what trouble have you brought to my door at this hour?" she asked, but she was already opening the door wider to admit them. "This is Beatrice O'Malley," Isaac explained. "She needs a place to stay." Sarah took in Beatrice's bruised face, pregnant belly, and her brother's coat wrapped around the young woman's shoulders. With a sigh that suggested she'd seen her share of hard luck cases, she nodded. "I've got a room on the first floor," she said. "No need for you to climb stairs in your condition. Come along." The room was small but immaculately clean, with a narrow bed, washstand, and a small chest of drawers. A colorful quilt brightened the otherwise sparse furnishings. "Thank you," Beatrice said, feeling overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. "You'll stay as long as you need to," Sarah said firmly. "We'll talk about arrangements in the morning." She turned to her brother. "I assume you're heading back to the ranch," Isaac nodded. "Got an early start tomorrow, cattle drive preparations." An awkward moment followed as Beatrice realized she was still wearing Isaac's coat. She began to remove it, but he shook his head. "Keep it for now," he said. "I've got others." "I can't take your coat," she protested. "You're not taking it," he corrected with a gentle smile. "I'm lending it to you, until you get back on your feet." Something in his steady gaze made Beatrice believe that perhaps, just perhaps, that might actually happen. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." Isaac Donovan tipped his hat. "No need for that. Get some rest, Miss Beatrice. Things have a way of looking brighter in the morning." As he turned to leave, Beatrice realized that for the first time since discovering she was pregnant, she felt something close to safe. The sun was streaming through the window when Beatrice awoke the next morning. For a disorienting moment, she didn't recognize her surroundings. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, along with the ache of her bruises. She sat up slowly, one hand automatically moving to her belly. The baby gave a reassuring kick, and Beatrice offered a silent prayer of thanks. A soft knock at the door preceded Sarah Donovan's entrance. She carried a tray with a steaming bowl, some bread, and a cup of tea. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the tray on the small table beside the bed. "It's just oatmeal and honey, but it'll give you strength." "Thank you," Beatrice said, suddenly aware of how ravenous she was. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning on the train. Sarah watched her eat for a moment, then sat in the room's only chair. "My brother told me a bit about your situation. Not much, that's not his way, but enough." She hesitated, then asked directly, "Do you have anywhere to go, Mrs. O'Malley?" Beatrice lowered her spoon. "No," she admitted, "and it's just Miss now, or it will be once I figure out how to file for divorce." Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on the divorce. "No family. My parents died 2 years ago. That's when I met Gregory, my husband. He was passing through our town in Ohio, working as a salesman. He was charming, said all the right things." Beatrice's voice grew bitter. "I was naive enough to believe him when he said he loved me. And now," Sarah prompted gently, "now I know he only married me for my family's house. He sold it right after the wedding, saying we'd use the money to start a new life out west. But the money's been disappearing, along with his affection." She touched her bruised face. "This started about the time I told him I was expecting. Last night was just the worst of it." Sarah's expression hardened. "Some men don't deserve the title," she said, My own husband wasn't much better, God rest his sorry soul. You're a widow? Beatrice asked. Sarah nodded. 7 years now. Best thing that ever happened to me was when that man fell off his horse drunk and broke his neck. Gave me the freedom to build this place. She gestured around her. It's not much, but it's mine, and no man can take it from me. The fierceness in Sarah's voice was oddly comforting. Here was a woman who had survived, who had rebuilt her life from ashes. I don't have any money, Beatrice confessed. Gregory took everything. I don't know how I'll pay for the room. We'll work something out, Sarah said firmly. You rest today, doctor's orders. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. After Sarah left, Beatrice finished her breakfast and then, exhausted despite having just woken, fell back asleep. When she next opened her eyes, the light had shifted, suggesting it was afternoon. A clean dress had been laid across the foot of the bed, along with some basic toiletries. Beside them was a note in neat handwriting. These might fit well enough for now. Belonged to my niece before she moved to Santa Fe. Come to the kitchen when you're ready. Sarah. Beatrice washed her face carefully, wincing at the tenderness of her bruises, then changed into the offered dress. It was a simple blue calico, a bit loose around the shoulders but accommodating of her growing belly. The familiar weight of Isaac's coat caught her eye where she'd hung it on a hook the night before. She ran her fingers over the worn fabric, remembering the kindness in his eyes. The boarding house was quiet as Beatrice made her way toward what she hoped was the kitchen. She found Sarah rolling out dough on a floured table. Ah, you're up, Sarah said, glancing up from her work. Feeling any better? Yes, thank you, Beatrice replied. And thank you for the dress. It suits you, Sarah said. Blue's a good color with your hair. Beatrice touched her auburn waves self-consciously. Is there anything I can help with? I'm a fair cook and I'd like to earn my keep. Sarah studied her for a moment, then nodded toward a basket of apples. You can peel those if you're up to it. I'm making pies for the boarders. Got 6 working men staying here now, plus 2 schoolteachers. They all eat like they've been starved. Beatrice settled at the table with the apples and a paring knife, grateful to have something useful to do. As they worked, Sarah asked questions about her life before Gregory, and Beatrice found herself talking about her childhood in Ohio, her father's small bookshop, and her mother's love of gardening. I always thought I'd have a garden of my own someday, she admitted. Foolish dream now, I suppose. Not foolish, Sarah corrected. Just on hold. The kitchen door swung open and Isaac Donovan entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. Beatrice's heart gave an unexpected flutter at the sight of him. In the daylight, she could see him more clearly, the strong line of his jaw, the crow's feet at the corners of his eyes, the way his dark hair curled slightly where it met his collar. Didn't expect to see you back so soon, Sarah said to her brother. Thought you had ranch business. Finished earlier than expected, Isaac replied. His eyes met Beatrice's. How are you feeling today, Miss Beatrice? Better, thank you, she said. Your sister has been very kind. Kind isn't the word most people use for Sarah, he teased, earning a glare from his sister. I'm practical, Sarah corrected. And speaking of practical, what brings you to town on a busy Tuesday? Isaac reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch, which he placed on the table. Brought the money I owe you for putting up 2 of my hands last month, he said. And I wanted to see how our guest was settling in. Our guest, Sarah repeated with raised eyebrows. So she's our responsibility now, is she? Isaac's face reddened slightly. I just meant I know what you meant, Sarah interrupted, her expression softening. And you're right, she is. She turned to Beatrice. My brother and I look after our own, and until you tell us otherwise, that includes you. Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything, Isaac said. But if you're feeling up to it, I thought you might like to take a short walk. Doctor said light exercise would be good, and it's a fine afternoon." Beatrice glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. "Fresh air would do you good," the older woman agreed. "Just don't overdo it." Minutes later, Beatrice found herself walking beside Isaac down Lordsburg's Main Street. She draped his coat over her shoulders again, more from a desire for security than from cold, as the afternoon was pleasantly mild. "It's not much of a town," Isaac said as they strolled past the general store, "but it's growing. The railroads brought new folks and the mines keep men employed." "It seems nice," Beatrice said politely. In truth, Lordsburg looked like many of the small western towns they'd passed through on their journey, a single main street lined with wooden buildings, a few side streets with modest homes, and open country beyond. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked after a comfortable silence. "Do you have plans?" Beatrice laughed mirthlessly. "Plans? No. Until yesterday, my plan was to follow my husband to California, where he claimed to have a business opportunity waiting." She touched her swollen middle. "Now my only plan is to ensure this child has a better life than I can presently imagine." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "That's a worthy plan." He hesitated, then added, "You know, Sarah could use help at the boarding house. She won't admit it, but running that place alone is wearing her down. She's not as young as she thinks she is." "I'd be happy to help," Beatrice said quickly. "I suggested as much this morning." "It wouldn't be charity," Isaac assured her. "Sarah doesn't have a charitable bone in her body. If she takes you on, it's because she needs the help." They had reached the edge of town, where the road continued west toward distant mountains. Beatrice paused, looking out at the vast landscape. The open sky and endless horizon were so different from the close, wooded hills of Ohio. "It's beautiful in its way," she said. "Harsh, but honest." Isaac glanced at her with newfound respect. "That's exactly right. Most Easterners only see the hardship, not the beauty." "I'm not blind to the hardship," Beatrice admitted. "I just think beauty and hardship often go hand in hand." Isaac's expression grew thoughtful. "You've had your share of hardship lately," he observed quietly. Beatrice touched her bruised face self-consciously. "These will heal." "And the other wounds?" he asked, his voice gentle. Beatrice looked away. "Those take longer, I suppose." They stood in companionable silence for a few moments before turning back toward town. As they approached the boarding house, Beatrice noticed a man loitering nearby, watching them intently. Something about his posture made her uneasy. Isaac noticed her discomfort. "Something wrong, that man," she said quietly. "The way he's watching us." Isaac followed her gaze, his posture immediately stiffening. "Wait here," he said, his voice suddenly hard. Before Beatrice could protest, Isaac strode toward the stranger. Though she couldn't hear their conversation, she could see the tension in Isaac's shoulders, the way the other man's hands clenched into fists. After a brief exchange, the stranger spat on the ground, cast a final glance toward Beatrice, and walked away. When Isaac returned, his face was grim. "Do you know a man named Jenkins? Works as a telegraph operator." Beatrice frowned. "No, why?" "That fellow works at the depot. Said a man came by this morning asking about a red-haired woman who might have come in on yesterday's train. Described you pretty specifically. Claimed to be your brother, concerned about your welfare." Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. "Gregory," she whispered. "But he left me. Why would he come back?" "Men like that don't like losing what they consider their property," Isaac said, his voice hard. "Even if they're the ones who threw it away." Fear clutched at Beatrice's heart. "What if he finds me?" Isaac's expression softened as he looked at her pale face. "He won't hurt you again," he promised. "Not while I'm around." The conviction in his voice made Beatrice believe him. even as a small voice inside warned her not to trust too quickly again. One man's broken promises were still too fresh in her mind to fully embrace another's, no matter how sincere they seemed. Nevertheless, as they walked back to the boarding house, Beatrice found herself drawing closer to Isaac Donovan's solid presence, instinctively seeking the safety he represented. And if his arm shifted slightly to create a protective barrier between her and the street, neither of them mentioned it. The next week passed in a blur of new routines for Beatrice. True to Isaac's prediction, Sarah had readily accepted her offer to help around the boarding house, though she insisted Beatrice take frequent rest periods. "That baby doesn't need you working yourself to exhaustion," Sarah had said firmly. "Besides, you're still healing." Beatrice's duties were light but fulfilling, helping with meal preparation, mending linens, and occasionally tending to the small kitchen garden behind the house. Sarah paid her a modest wage plus room and board, which she set aside with religious dedication. Each coin represented another step toward independence. Isaac visited regularly, usually around supper time. He claimed it was Sarah's cooking that drew him, but Beatrice noticed his eyes followed her movements when he thought she wasn't looking. His attention wasn't unwelcome. In fact, she found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both excited and frightened her. "You're being foolish," she scolded herself one evening as she prepared for his arrival by pinching color into her pale cheeks. "You're a married woman with a child on the way, and you've barely known him 2 weeks." Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when Isaac appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, his face breaking into a warm smile when he saw her. "Evening, Miss Beatrice," he greeted her, using the formal address he'd maintained despite her insistence that just Beatrice would do. "You're looking well today." And she was. The bruises had faded to yellowish shadows, and regular meals had brought a healthy glow back to her skin. Even her spirits had improved, thanks largely to the steady kindness of the Donovan siblings. "Thank you," she replied, self-consciously smoothing her borrowed dress over her growing belly. "Sarah's cooking is performing miracles." "Sarah's cooking could raise the dead," Isaac agreed with a laugh, "but I think it's more than that." His eyes held hers for a moment too long, and Beatrice felt heat rising to her cheeks. Sarah's pointed cough broke the moment. "If you two are finished making eyes at each other, dinner's getting cold." "Sarah," Beatrice protested, mortified. Isaac just laughed and took his usual seat at the kitchen table. The boarders ate in the dining room, but Sarah, Beatrice, and Isaac had taken to having their meals in the cozier kitchen. As they ate, Isaac shared news from the ranch: a new foal, preparations for the coming winter, plans for a cattle drive in the spring. Beatrice listened attentively, finding comfort in the rhythms of a life so different from her own. "There's a harvest dance next Saturday," Isaac mentioned casually as they finished their meal. "At the town hall, nothing fancy, but the whole town turns out." "That sounds lovely," Beatrice said, "I thought." Isaac cleared his throat. "That is, if you're feeling up to it, maybe you'd like to go." Sarah set her fork down with a clatter. "Isaac Donovan, are you asking a married woman to a dance?" Isaac's face reddened. "It's not like that, Sarah. The whole town will be there. It's just an evening out." "Beatrice has been cooped up here for days." Beatrice felt a pang of disappointment, quickly suppressed. Of course he hadn't meant it as a proper invitation. He was just being kind, as always. "I'd love to go," she said quickly, "but I don't think I should. Gregory might still be looking for me." Isaac's expression darkened. "No sign of him since that fellow at the depot asked around. My guess is he's long gone." "Even so," Beatrice said, "I'm not exactly in a position to go dancing." She gestured to her belly. "Plenty of expectant mothers dance," Sarah interjected unexpectedly. Nothing wild, mind you, but a sedate waltz never hurt anyone. Dr. Mitchell's wife danced until she was 8 months along with their youngest. Beatrice looked at her in surprise. Sarah hadn't seemed supportive of the idea a moment ago. Really, it's all right, she demurred. I wouldn't want to cause any gossip. Folks will gossip regardless, Sarah said with unexpected gentleness. Might as well give them something worth talking about. Besides, she added with a significant look at her brother, you'll be well chaperoned. And so it was decided. Isaac would escort both women to the harvest dance, a prospect that filled Beatrice with equal parts anticipation and dread. She had nothing suitable to wear, for one thing, and for another, the memory of the last social event she'd attended, a church picnic, where Gregory had charmed her with his attentions, left a bitter taste in her mouth. Yet as the week progressed and the night of the dance drew nearer, Beatrice found herself looking forward to it. Sarah surprised her by producing a pretty green dress that, with some alterations, would accommodate her condition. It was my mother's, Sarah explained as she pinned the fabric. She was a big woman, God rest her, and fond of rich food. Never thought her size would come in handy, but here we are. The night of the dance arrived clear and cool. Beatrice stood before the small mirror in her room, hardly recognizing the woman who looked back at her. The green dress complemented her auburn hair, which Sarah had insisted on arranging in a becoming style with a ribbon. A light application of rice powder concealed the last faint traces of her bruises. "You'll do," Sarah declared, surveying her handiwork. "Just remember, you're still healing. No wild reels or polkas." "I doubt anyone will ask me to dance at all," Beatrice said, smoothing the fabric over her prominent belly. Sarah snorted. "You underestimate the shortage of women in this territory. Pregnant or not, you'll have suitors lining up. Just be careful which ones you encourage." A knock at the front door announced Isaac's arrival. When Beatrice emerged from her room, she was rewarded by the look of stunned appreciation on his face. "Miss Beatrice," he said, his voice oddly husky, "you look beautiful." Beatrice felt her cheeks grow warm. "Thank you." Sarah worked wonders with this dress. "It's not the dress," he said simply. The town hall was already filled with people when they arrived. Lanterns and candles cast a warm glow over the proceedings, and a small band played on a raised platform at one end of the room. Tables laden with food and drink lined the walls, while the center of the floor was reserved for dancing. Beatrice felt eyes turn toward her as they entered, and instinctively moved closer to Isaac's reassuring presence. "Ignore them," he murmured near her ear. "They're just curious about the newcomer." "The pregnant newcomer," she corrected with a wry smile. "That too," he admitted, "but their curiosity will pass once something more interesting comes along." Sarah soon disappeared into a group of women her age, leaving Beatrice and Isaac standing somewhat awkwardly at the edge of the dance floor. "Would you care for some punch?" Isaac offered. "Yes, thank you," Beatrice replied, grateful for the chance to gather her thoughts. While Isaac went to fetch refreshments, a portly man with a friendly face approached. "You must be Miss O'Malley," he said, tipping his hat. "I'm Mayor Williams. We're pleased to have you join our little community." "Thank you," Beatrice said, surprised. "How do you know my name?" The mayor chuckled. "Not much happens in Lordsburg without word getting around. Sarah Donovan taking in a young, expectant mother is the kind of news that travels fast. Not that there's anything wrong with that," he added hastily. "We're a forward-thinking town." Beatrice didn't quite know how to respond to this assessment of Lordsburg's progressive attitudes, but she was saved by Isaac's return with 2 cups of punch. "Mayor," Isaac greeted the older man with a nod. "I see you've met Miss Beatrice." "Indeed," the mayor replied. "Just welcoming her to our community." He glanced between them with undisguised interest. You two make a handsome couple if you don't mind my saying so." "Oh, we're not," Beatrice began. "Miss O'Malley is a friend of the family," Isaac cut in smoothly. "My sister and I are helping her get established." The mayor's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, enjoy the festivities." With a final curious look, he moved on to greet other attendees. "I'm sorry about that," Isaac said quietly once the mayor was out of earshot. "People will jump to conclusions." "It's all right," Beatrice assured him, though her heart had given a peculiar lurch at the mayor's assumption. "I'm used to being the subject of gossip by now." The band struck up a waltz and couples began moving onto the dance floor. Beatrice watched them with a touch of envy, remembering a time when she'd loved dancing. Isaac set down his cup and turned to her with unexpected formality. "Miss Beatrice O'Malley," he said, extending his hand, "would you do me the honor of this dance?" Beatrice hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I'm not exactly light on my feet these days. I've led cattle through mountain passes," Isaac said with a smile. "I think I can manage a waltz with an expectant mother." His confidence was infectious, and Beatrice found herself placing her hand in his. "In that case, Mr. Donovan, I accept." Isaac led her to the edge of the dance floor, positioning them away from the more energetic couples. His hand at her waist was respectful, maintaining a proper distance while still supporting her securely. "It's been a while," Beatrice confessed as they began to move to the music. "For me as well," Isaac admitted. "Not much call for dancing at the ranch." Despite their mutual rustiness, they moved together with surprising ease. Isaac was a confident lead, guiding her gently through the steps, careful not to overtax her. Beatrice found herself relaxing into the dance, enjoying the simple pleasure of movement after weeks of caution. "You're doing fine," Isaac encouraged when she stumbled slightly. "So are you," she replied with a smile. As they circled the floor, Beatrice became aware of curious glances and whispered comments, but found she cared less than she'd expected. There was something liberating about being here with Isaac, defying expectations and gossip. The music ended too soon, and Isaac led her back to the edge of the room. "Thank you," he said, as if she had done him the favor. "It was my pleasure," she replied truthfully. The evening continued pleasantly. Isaac introduced her to several of his friends and acquaintances, all of whom treated her with polite curiosity. No one directly mentioned her condition or lack of a husband, though Beatrice could read the questions in their eyes. Sarah rejoined them occasionally, clearly keeping an eye on the situation but not hovering too obviously. During one of her absences, Isaac guided Beatrice to a quiet corner. "Are you enjoying yourself?" he asked. "More than I expected to," she admitted. "Though I think I'm the subject of considerable speculation." Isaac's expression grew serious. "Does that bother you?" Beatrice considered the question. "It should, shouldn't it? A proper woman would be mortified." "Are you a proper woman?" he asked, his eyes twinkling. Beatrice laughed, surprising herself. "I used to think so. Now I'm not sure what I am besides expectant and alone." "Not alone," Isaac corrected quietly. "Not anymore." The intensity in his gaze made Beatrice's breath catch. For a moment, the noise of the party faded, and it seemed as if they were the only two people in the room. The spell was broken by a commotion near the entrance. Raised voices carried across the room, and Beatrice saw several men converging on a disturbance by the door. "What's happening?" she asked, craning her neck to see. Isaac frowned, moving slightly to shield her from whatever was occurring. "Not sure. Wait here, I'll check." But before he could move away, the crowd parted, and Beatrice felt her blood turn to ice. Standing in the center of the disturbance, disheveled and clearly drunk but unmistakable, was Gregory O'Malley. "Where is she?" he was demanding loudly. "Where's my wife?" Beatrice instinctively shrank back, her hand going protectively to her belly. Isaac noticed her reaction immediately. "That's him, isn't it?" he asked, his voice low and hard. "Your husband." She could only nod, fear closing her throat. "Stay here," Isaac said firmly. "I'll handle this." "Isaac?" "No," Beatrice began, but he was already moving toward the confrontation, his tall figure cutting through the curious onlookers. Gregory spotted her at the same moment, his bloodshot eyes narrowing with malicious recognition. "There you are, you faithless bitch," he snarled, lurching in her direction. Isaac intercepted him, placing himself squarely in Gregory's path. "That's far enough, O'Malley." Gregory looked up at the taller man with bleary confusion. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't like men who beat their wives," Isaac replied evenly. "Especially pregnant ones." Gregory's face contorted with rage. "That's my wife and my child. Get out of my way." "No," Isaac said simply. The simple refusal seemed to enrage Gregory further. With a roar, he launched himself at Isaac, swinging wildly. Isaac sidestepped the clumsy attack, then delivered a single powerful blow to Gregory's midsection. The smaller man doubled over, gasping for breath. The town sheriff, alerted by the commotion, pushed through the crowd. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "This man assaulted me," Gregory wheezed, pointing at Isaac. "Attacked me for no reason." "That's not true," Beatrice said, finding her voice at last as she moved to stand beside Isaac. "He was defending me. This man, my husband, abandoned me at the train depot after beating me. He's dangerous." The sheriff looked between them, then at the watching crowd. "Is that right, Donovan?" Isaac nodded. "Found her at the depot myself, bruised and alone. Doc Mitchell treated her injuries. He can confirm." The sheriff turned to Gregory. "That true, mister?" "She's my wife," Gregory insisted, as if that explained everything. "I have the right to discipline her as I see fit, and she's carrying my child. I've come to take what's mine." A murmur of disapproval ran through the onlookers. Even in the rough and ready society of the frontier, there were limits to what was considered acceptable treatment of a woman. "Not in my town, you don't," the sheriff said firmly. "We've got laws here, and beating a pregnant woman isn't something we take kindly to." "She's lying," Gregory protested, but his bloodshot eyes and alcohol-fueled belligerence undermined his credibility. "I think you'd better spend the night in my jail," the sheriff decided. "Sleep it off, and we'll sort this out in the morning." He gestured to a deputy who stepped forward to take Gregory's arm. Gregory resisted briefly, then seemed to deflate. "This isn't over," he said, glaring at Beatrice. "You're still my wife. You belong to me." "Not anymore," Beatrice replied, surprising herself with her steadiness. "I want a divorce, Gregory. I'll never come back to you." Gregory lunged toward her again, but the deputy restrained him. "You'll regret this," he spat as they dragged him away. "Both of you will." As the disruption receded, Beatrice became aware of the stares of the townsfolk. Shame and fear threatened to overwhelm her, and she felt her legs grow weak. Isaac's arm came around her waist, supporting her. "Let's get you home," he said quietly. Sarah appeared at her other side. "I'll get your shawl," she said, practical as always. As they helped her from the hall, Beatrice felt the curious gazes following them. But there was something else in the expressions of the townsfolk now: sympathy, and perhaps even respect. Outside in the cool night air, Beatrice's composure finally broke. "I'm sorry," she whispered as tears began to fall. "I've ruined everything." "You've ruined nothing," Isaac said firmly. "That man is the only one who should be ashamed tonight." Sarah nodded in agreement. "Isaac's right, and you should be proud of yourself." Standing up to him took courage. Beatrice wasn't convinced, but she was too exhausted to argue. The confrontation had drained what little energy she had, and now all she wanted was the safety of her small room at the boarding house. "What happens now?" she asked as they walked slowly down the darkened street. "He'll be released tomorrow. The sheriff will likely run him out of town," Isaac said, "but if he doesn't, I'll have a word with him myself." "No," Beatrice said quickly. "I don't want you getting into trouble because of me." "It wouldn't be the first time," Sarah muttered, earning a reproving glance from her brother. "What Sarah means," Isaac clarified, "is that I can handle myself. And men like Gregory O'Malley usually back down when confronted by someone they can't intimidate." Beatrice wasn't so sure. The hatred in Gregory's eyes had been real, and she knew from experience that his pride wouldn't allow him to simply walk away from what he saw as a challenge to his authority. Back at the boarding house, Sarah set about brewing tea while Isaac built up the fire in the small parlor. Beatrice sat huddled in a chair, Isaac's coat once again wrapped around her shoulders. "I should return to the ranch," Isaac said reluctantly once they were settled. "The hands will wonder where I've got to." "Of course," Beatrice said, though the thought of him leaving filled her with dread. Isaac seemed to read her fears. "I'll speak to the sheriff on my way, make sure he knows the situation." He hesitated, then added, "If you'd feel safer elsewhere, I could take you to the ranch tomorrow. We've got a spare room in the main house." The offer was tempting, but Beatrice shook her head. "I can't keep running, and I don't want to put more people at risk." "You're not putting anyone at risk," Isaac insisted. "Gregory O'Malley is a coward who preys on those weaker than himself. He won't try anything with me around." "He might," Beatrice said softly. "You didn't see his face when they took him away. He hates me, Isaac, and now he hates you too." Sarah, who had been quietly listening, set down her teacup with a decisive click. "Then we'll be ready for him," she said. "This is my house, and I've got a shotgun I'm not afraid to use." Her fierce expression softened slightly. "Get some rest, Beatrice. Things will look clearer in the morning." After Isaac left, promising to return the next day, Sarah helped Beatrice prepare for bed. As the older woman turned down the covers, Beatrice noticed her distracted expression. "What is it?" she asked. "You're worried too, aren't you?" Sarah sighed. "I'm always worried when my brother gets that look in his eye," she admitted. "He's got a protective streak a mile wide, always has." "I never meant to cause trouble between you," Beatrice said, guilt weighing heavily on her shoulders. Sarah turned to her with unexpected fierceness. "You've caused no trouble, girl. It's that worthless husband of yours who's done that." She paused, then added more gently, "Besides, I haven't seen my brother look at a woman the way he looks at you in a very long time." Beatrice felt her cheeks grow warm. "He's just being kind." "Isaac's kind to everyone," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "But he doesn't dance with everyone or visit every day or get into fistfights at harvest dances for just anyone." "Even if that were true," Beatrice said carefully, "I'm still a married woman, and I'm carrying another man's child." "For now," Sarah agreed. "But you said yourself you want a divorce, and as for the child—" She gestured vaguely toward Beatrice's belly. "A good man doesn't hold a child responsible for its father's sins." The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating that Isaac might care for her as more than just a charity case, that there might be a future for her beyond the disaster her marriage had become. But Beatrice had learned the hard way not to trust in easy solutions or romantic dreams. "One day at a time," she said finally. "First I need to deal with Gregory." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Sensible girl. Now get some sleep. That baby needs its rest even if you think you don't." That night, Beatrice dreamed of dancing. Not the sedate waltz she'd shared with Isaac at the harvest dance, but a wild, joyful dance under an open sky. In the dream, she wasn't pregnant or afraid. She was free, spinning with abandon in Isaac's strong arms. She woke with the ghost of a smile on her lips, only to have it fade as reality reasserted itself. Gregory was still in town. And whatever happened next, Beatrice knew that confronting him and her past was unavoidable if she ever wanted that dream of freedom to become reality. The morning brought clear skies and a crisp autumn chill. Beatrice rose early, unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. She dressed carefully in one of the practical dresses Sarah had altered for her, then made her way to the kitchen to begin breakfast preparations. To her surprise, Isaac was already there, deep in conversation with his sister. Both looked up when she entered, their expressions telling her immediately that something was wrong. "What's happened?" she asked, one hand automatically going to her belly in a protective gesture. "Gregory's gone," Isaac said without preamble. "Sheriff released him this morning with orders to leave town, and he seemed to comply. Bought a ticket for the westbound train." Beatrice felt a surge of relief, quickly followed by suspicion. That doesn't sound like Gregory. He's not one to give up so easily. "My thoughts exactly," Isaac agreed grimly. "Which is why I came early. I think you should come to the ranch for a few days, just until we're sure he's really gone." Beatrice glanced at Sarah, expecting the practical woman to dismiss such concerns, but to her surprise, Sarah was nodding. "I think Isaac's right," she said. "Just as a precaution. I've already packed some things for you." The fact that both Donovans were worried enough to take such measures sent a chill through Beatrice. "You really think he'd try something?" Isaac's expression darkened. "Men like O'Malley don't like being humiliated publicly, and he made it clear he considers you his property." "The ranch is isolated," Sarah added. "No one would go there looking for you, and Isaac has men who can keep an eye out." Beatrice considered their arguments. She'd been trying to convince herself that Gregory's appearance at the dance had been the last gasp of his control over her, that he would recognize the futility of pursuing her and move on with his life. But deep down, she knew better. Gregory's rage had been real, and his threats weren't empty. "All right," she agreed reluctantly, "but only for a few days. I can't hide forever." "Just until we're sure he's left the territory," Isaac promised. "Sarah has business in Santa Fe next week anyway. You can return with her if all's clear by then." The plan was practical, and Beatrice found herself nodding in agreement despite her reservations about imposing further on the Donovans' hospitality. They left within the hour, Beatrice riding in Isaac's wagon while he drove. The Rocking D Ranch lay about 10 miles outside Lordsburg, close enough for convenient trips to town, but far enough to offer the isolation Sarah had mentioned. As they traveled, Beatrice watched the landscape unfold before her. The terrain was harsher than anything she'd known in Ohio, with scrubby vegetation clinging to rocky soil and distant mountains shimmering in the heat. Yet there was a stark beauty to it that appealed to something in her soul, perhaps the same part that had found the courage to stand up to Gregory the night before. "It's beautiful out here," she said, breaking the companionable silence. Isaac glanced at her with a pleased expression. "Most Easterners don't think so. They see the harshness, not the beauty." "It's honest," Beatrice said, echoing her earlier sentiment. "There's no pretense. The land is what it is, and it makes no apologies for it." Isaac studied her for a moment, something like admiration in his eyes. "You're an unusual woman, Beatrice O'Malley." "I'm not sure that's a compliment," she replied with a small smile. "It is," he assured her, "unusual in the best way possible." They crested a rise, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them, a collection of sturdy buildings nestled in a small valley, with corrals and outbuildings arranged in a practical manner. A creek wound through the property, its banks lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. Cattle grazed on the surrounding hillsides, and horses moved about in a large paddock near the main house. "It's not much," Isaac said, a hint of apology in his voice. "Nothing like what you're probably used to back east." "It's wonderful," Beatrice said sincerely. "You've built something real here." Isaac's face softened with pride. "My father started it. I've just tried to keep it going, make it a little better each year." As they approached the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes against the sun. She was older than Beatrice had expected, with silver-streaked dark hair and a face weathered by years in the sun. "That's Alina," Isaac explained. "She keeps house for me. Been with the family since I was a boy." Alina greeted them with obvious curiosity, her dark eyes taking in Beatrice's condition with a quick, assessing glance. Isaac introduced them in a mixture of English and Spanish, explaining the situation in terms that spared Beatrice's dignity while conveying the seriousness of the circumstances. Alina's expression softened immediately. "La pobrecita," she said, taking Beatrice's hand in her work-roughened ones. "You come inside now, rest, eat, everything better soon." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable. Simple furniture built for practicality rather than show filled the rooms, but touches of beauty were evident in hand-woven blankets, carefully crafted pottery, and a few well-chosen paintings. A large fireplace dominated the main room, currently unlit in the autumn warmth. "It's lovely," Beatrice said, meaning it. Isaac looked pleased but embarrassed by her approval. "Alina makes it comfortable. Left to my own devices, it would be considerably less welcoming." Alina led Beatrice to a small but pleasant bedroom at the back of the house. "For guests," she explained in her accented English. "You rest now. Baby needs rest." Left alone, Beatrice sat on the edge of the bed, feeling oddly disoriented. Just weeks ago, she had been traveling west with a husband she already feared, heading toward a future that grew more uncertain with each mile. Now here she was, a guest in a stranger's home, contemplating divorce and facing an unknown future as a single mother. Yet despite the uncertainty, Beatrice felt a curious sense of peace. For the first time since her parents' deaths, she wasn't alone in her struggles. The Donovans had taken her in without question, offering protection and friendship when she needed it most. And then there was Isaac himself. Beatrice couldn't deny the growing attraction she felt toward him, his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But she was still married, still carrying another man's child. Any feelings beyond friendship would only complicate an already difficult situation. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Alina entered with a tray bearing a glass of milk and some freshly baked bread. "You eat," she said firmly. "Then rest. Senor Isaac, he worry about you. Say you very brave but need care." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at the thought of Isaac discussing her with his housekeeper. "He's been very kind," she said carefully. Alina's dark eyes twinkled knowingly. "She very kind, but not just kind. He look at you like man who sees sunrise after long night." Before Beatrice could formulate a response to this startling observation, Alina patted her hand and left, closing the door softly behind her. Alone again, Beatrice ate the simple meal, finding herself surprisingly hungry. Afterward, weariness overcame her, and she stretched out on the bed for what she intended to be a brief rest. She fell asleep almost instantly. When she woke, the quality of light in the room had changed, suggesting it was late afternoon. Feeling refreshed and slightly embarrassed at having slept so long, Beatrice smoothed her dress and hair before venturing out of the bedroom. She found Isaac in what appeared to be a study, bent over account books at a large desk. He looked up when she entered, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. "You're awake," he said, rising from his chair. "Did you rest well?" "Too well," Beatrice admitted. I didn't mean to sleep half the day away. You needed it, Isaac said simply. And there's no schedule here you need to worry about. Beatrice moved to the window, looking out at the ranch spread before her. Men were working with horses in a corral nearby, their shouts and the animals' movements creating a lively tableau. It's so peaceful here, she observed. So far from everything. Isaac came to stand beside her, his tall frame casting a slight shadow. That's what I love about it. The world could be ending in town, and out here, life just goes on. Cattle graze, horses need training, crops need tending. Is that why you became a rancher? She asked. For the peace, Isaac considered the question. Partly, but mostly it was what I knew. My father taught me to love this land, to respect what it can give and what it can take away. He glanced at her. What about you? What did you dream of becoming before life took its unexpected turns? The question caught Beatrice off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her dreams. I wanted to be a teacher, she admitted. I even took some courses at a women's college in Cincinnati. But then my parents died, and there was the store to run, and then Gregory. She trailed off, the familiar pattern of dreams deferred all too clear in retrospect. You could still teach, Isaac said quietly. Lordsburg is growing. They'll need good teachers. The simple faith in her abilities warmed Beatrice in a way she hadn't expected. Perhaps, she said, allowing herself to consider the possibility for the first time in years. Once the baby comes and things settle. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the ranch hands work. Then Isaac cleared his throat. I spoke with Judge Peterson this morning before we left town about your situation. Beatrice turned to him in surprise. You did? Isaac nodded, his expression serious. He says there are grounds for divorce, especially given the circumstances. Abandonment and cruel treatment are both recognized causes in the territory. It wouldn't be quick, but it's possible. I can't afford a lawyer, Beatrice said, the practical obstacle immediately apparent. Judge Peterson recommended a man in Santa Fe who sometimes takes cases pro bono, Isaac replied. Especially for women in difficult circumstances. I took the liberty of sending him a telegram. Beatrice was momentarily speechless. The possibility of freedom from her marriage, legal recognized freedom, had seemed so distant just days ago. Thank you, she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. You don't know what that means. I think I might, Isaac said gently. No one deserves to be trapped in a situation like yours, Beatrice, especially not someone with so much to offer the world. His belief in her worth, stated so simply and with such conviction, broke something inside Beatrice. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over before she could stop them. I'm sorry, she said, wiping at her cheeks. It's just been so long since someone believed in me. Isaac's expression was pained. Don't apologize for having feelings. God knows I've shed my share of tears over the years. The admission, so contrary to the stoic image most men tried to maintain, endeared him to Beatrice even more. Will you tell me about yourself? She asked impulsively. Not just the ranch, but you, your life before we met. Isaac seemed surprised by the request, but after a moment he nodded. Not much to tell, but I'm willing if you are. Join me for dinner. Dinner at the Rocking D was a simple but satisfying affair. Alina had prepared a hearty stew with fresh baked bread, and she hovered nearby to ensure Beatrice ate her fill. For the baby, she insisted, refilling Beatrice's bowl despite her protests. As they ate, Isaac spoke of his childhood on the ranch, his education at a school back east where his mother had insisted he be sent. To learn more than just roping cattle, he explained with a smile, and his return home after his father's death. Sarah was already married by then, he said. Her husband was a mean drunk, but she wouldn't leave him. stayed right up until he killed himself with his own foolishness. After that, she decided she was better off running her own life. She's remarkable, Beatrice said. So independent. Stubborn is the word I'd use, Isaac replied with obvious affection. But yes, remarkable too. And you, Beatrice ventured. You never married, a shadow crossed Isaac's face. Once. A long time ago, her name was Margaret. She died in childbirth along with our son. Oh, Isaac, Beatrice breathed, instinctively reaching across the table to touch his hand. I'm so sorry. He turned his palm up, briefly squeezing her fingers. It was 15 years ago. The pain fades, though it never quite disappears. His eyes met hers. That's why. When I found you at the depot that night, I couldn't just leave you there. The connection between them in that moment was palpable, a shared understanding of loss and resilience that transcended words. Beatrice felt her heart expanding with emotion she wasn't ready to name. The moment was broken by Alina's return with coffee and a simple apple cake. As they turned to lighter topics, the upcoming winter, plans for the ranch, stories of the town's more colorful characters, Beatrice found herself relaxing into a sense of companionship she'd almost forgotten was possible. Later, as they sat before the now lit fireplace, Beatrice found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind since the harvest dance. You think Gregory has really left town? Isaac's expression grew serious. I hope so. But I won't lie to you, something about the whole situation doesn't sit right. He seemed too willing to leave after making such a scene. That's what I thought, Beatrice admitted. It's not like him to give up so easily, especially when his pride is involved. The sheriff's keeping an eye out, Isaac assured her. And I've asked my men to be alert for strangers around the ranch. You're safe here, Beatrice, she nodded, wanting to believe him. I've been running from Gregory's anger for so long, I'm not sure I remember what safe feels like anymore. Isaac studied her face in the firelight. You will, he promised quietly. You will. The next few days established a peaceful routine. Beatrice spent her mornings helping Alina with household tasks, learning Spanish phrases from the older woman and sharing stories of her life back east. In the afternoons, she often sat on the porch, reading books from Isaac's surprisingly extensive library, or simply watching the activities of the ranch unfold before her. Isaac divided his time between ranch work and spending time with Beatrice. He showed her around the property, introduced her to his favorite horses, and even taught her the basics of roping, a skill she found surprisingly enjoyable despite her awkward condition. You're a natural, he told her after she successfully lassoed a practice post on her third try. Most Easterners can't get the hang of it so quickly. Maybe I was meant to be a rancher's wife, she joked, then immediately flushed at the implication of her words. If Isaac noticed her discomfort, he didn't show it. Instead, he merely smiled and said, Maybe you were meant to be whatever you decide to be, Beatrice. That's the beauty of the West, it lets people reinvent themselves. The words stayed with her, a promise of possibility in a life that had seemed so constrained. On the fourth day of her stay, a letter arrived from Sarah, brought by one of the ranch hands who had been to town. She would be delayed in returning from Santa Fe, she wrote, as some business matters were taking longer than expected. Beatrice tried to ignore the disappointment she felt at the news, telling herself she shouldn't be so comfortable hiding away at the ranch. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, Isaac turned to her with unusual seriousness. I received word from town today, he said. Gregory O'Malley has definitely left on the westbound train. The conductor confirmed he disembarked in Tucson. Relief flooded through Beatrice. So it's over. He's really gone. It appears so, Isaac said, though his expression remained cautious. The lawyer in Santa Fe responded to my telegram as well. He's willing to take your case, but you'll need to go there in person to file the papers. I could go with Sarah when she returns, Beatrice suggested. Isaac nodded. That would be best. She knows Santa Fe well and could help you get settled while you're there. The practicality of the conversation couldn't quite mask the undercurrent between them, the awareness that once legal proceedings began, Beatrice would need to establish her own life, separate from the protection the Donovans had provided. Isaac, she began hesitantly, I don't know how to thank you for all you've done. You and Sarah both. I hate to think where I'd be if you hadn't found me that night. You don't need to thank me, Isaac said simply. Helping you has been. He paused, searching for words. It's been a privilege, Beatrice. Watching you find your strength again, seeing you begin to hope for the future, it's reminded me of things I'd forgotten. What things? She asked softly. He looked out at the darkening landscape. That life goes on. That new beginnings are possible, even after great loss. His eyes met hers. That sometimes what looks like the end of everything is really just the start of something new. The depth of feeling in his voice made Beatrice's heart race. In that moment, she wanted nothing more than to lean into him, to feel his arms around her and know the safety they promised. But the weight of her condition, the complications of her marriage, and her own fear of vulnerability held her back. I hope you're right, she said instead. About new beginnings. Isaac seemed about to say more when the sound of approaching hoofbeats caught their attention. Both turned toward the road, where a rider was approaching at speed. That's Jack Thompson, Isaac said, recognition in his voice. One of the hands I sent to town this morning. The young cowboy reined in his horse sharply, dismounting almost before the animal had stopped. His face was grim as he approached the porch. Mr. Donovan, he said, tipping his hat to Isaac, then to Beatrice. Madam, sorry to disturb your evening, but there's trouble. What kind of trouble? Isaac asked, immediately alert. It's that O'Malley fellow, Jack said, glancing at Beatrice apologetically. Sheriff Timmons just found out he never got on that train to Tucson. Bought the ticket to throw folks off his trail, but he's been seen hanging around Lordsburg. At the Broken Spoke Saloon, asking questions about the ranch. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. He's looking for me. Appears so, madam, Jack confirmed. Sheriff wanted you to know right away, Mr. Donovan. Said he's got men watching for him, but O'Malley's been careful. Only shows himself when he's drinking, then disappears again. Isaac's expression hardened. Thank you, Jack. Tell the men to double the night watches and make sure everyone's armed. He turned to Beatrice. You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, we'll figure out what to do. But Beatrice was already shaking her head. No, Isaac, I can't put you and your people in danger. Gregory is my problem, not yours. You're not putting anyone in danger, Isaac said firmly. O'Malley is. And if he thinks he can come onto my land and threaten someone under my protection, he's sorely mistaken. The conviction in his voice brooked no argument, but Beatrice couldn't shake the feeling that she had brought this trouble to Isaac's door. After Jack had gone to deliver Isaac's instructions to the other ranch hands, they moved inside. Elena, sensing the tension, brought coffee and then discreetly retired to her own quarters at the back of the house. We should contact the lawyer in Santa Fe immediately, Beatrice said, her mind racing. If I can file for divorce quickly, maybe Gregory will realize there's nothing to gain by pursuing me. That won't stop a man like him, Isaac said grimly. He's not thinking rationally, Beatrice. This is about control, not legal rights. Deep down, she knew he was right. Gregory's pursuit wasn't about reclaiming a wife he loved or even a child he wanted. It was about possessing what he considered his property and punishing those who had defied him. What then? She asked, desperation creeping into her voice. Do I spend the rest of my life running, looking over my shoulder? Isaac's expression softened. He moved to sit beside her on the sofa, taking her hands in his. "No," he said firmly. "You live your life, Beatrice, right here if that's what you want. You build something new, something he can't touch or taint." "Here," she repeated, her heart quickening at the implication. Isaac met her gaze steadily. "I won't pretend I haven't thought about it," he admitted. "About you staying, not just until it's safe, but beyond that." "Isaac," she began, not sure whether she was going to encourage or discourage the direction of his thoughts. "You don't have to say anything now," he assured her quickly. "I know it's too soon. You're still married, still sorting out your life. But I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, there's a place for you here." He paused, then added quietly, "With me." The simple declaration, spoken without dramatic flourish or demands, touched Beatrice deeply. This was so different from Gregory's whirlwind courtship, with its grandiose promises and hidden agendas. Isaac was offering her something real, something built on mutual respect and genuine affection rather than possession. "I don't know what to say," she confessed. "Except that being here with you, it's the first time I've felt like myself in years." Isaac's smile was tender. "That's enough for now. The rest can wait until Gregory O'Malley is no longer a threat." They sat in companionable silence for a time, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. Not a commitment, not yet, but an acknowledgement of possibility. Eventually, Isaac rose to check on the security arrangements, ensuring that men were posted at strategic points around the ranch. When he returned, he found Beatrice still sitting where he'd left her, her expression troubled. "What is it?" he asked, concerned. "I was just thinking," she said slowly. "Gregory won't stop coming after me, not until he's forced to." She looked up at Isaac, determination hardening her features. "Which means we need to force him." "What do you have in mind?" Isaac asked cautiously. "A trap," Beatrice said, her voice steady. "He's looking for me. Let him find me, but on our terms, not his." Isaac frowned. "That's too dangerous, Beatrice. I won't put you at risk." "I'm already at risk," she pointed out. "As long as Gregory is out there nursing his grudge and his wounded pride, neither of us is safe. This way, at least, we control when and where the confrontation happens." Isaac studied her face, seeing the resolve in her eyes. "You're serious about this?" "I am," Beatrice confirmed. "I'm tired of running, Isaac, tired of being afraid. If I'm going to build a new life here or anywhere, I need to face him one last time." For a long moment, Isaac was silent, weighing her words against his instinct to protect her. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right, but we do this carefully with every precaution, and you follow my lead." "Agreed," Beatrice said, relief evident in her voice. "What's the plan?" They stayed up late into the night, discussing strategies and contingencies. By the time they retired to their respective rooms, a plan had taken shape, one that would bring Gregory O'Malley out of hiding and, hopefully, end his threat once and for all. As Beatrice lay in bed that night, one hand resting protectively on her swollen belly, she reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 3 weeks ago, she had been a beaten, abandoned woman with no hope for the future. Now she was plotting to confront her abuser, supported by a man who saw her strength rather than her vulnerability. "We'll be all right," she whispered to her unborn child, and this time she almost believed it. The next day dawned clear and cool, a perfect autumn morning that belied the tension of their situation. Beatrice rose early, dressing carefully in one of the practical dresses Sarah had altered for her. Today, she would return to Lordsburg as part of their plan to draw Gregory into the open. Isaac was already awake when she emerged from her room, his expression grave as he checked his revolver before tucking it into its holster. "Are you sure about this?" he asked when he saw her. There's still time to change your mind." "I'm sure," Beatrice replied, though her stomach churned with nervousness. "It's time to end this one way or another." They ate a light breakfast, neither having much appetite. Elena, who had been informed of their plan in broad strokes, pressed extra food on Beatrice for the baby and muttered protective prayers in Spanish as they prepared to leave. The ride to town was tense, both scanning the landscape for any sign of Gregory or other trouble. Jack Thompson rode ahead as a scout, while two other ranch hands followed at a discreet distance, providing additional security. The plan was simple, but, they hoped, effective. Beatrice would be seen publicly in Lordsburg, creating an opportunity for Gregory to approach. Sheriff Timmons and his deputies would be positioned strategically around town, ready to intervene. Isaac would stay close to Beatrice at all times, ensuring her immediate protection. "If O'Malley takes the bait," Isaac had explained, "we'll have him arrested for assault and threatening behavior. The judge is a fair man. He'll see that O'Malley is dangerous. At the very least, we can get him sent away from the territory with orders not to return." It was mid-morning when they arrived in Lordsburg. The town was bustling with its usual activity: shoppers at the general store, men gathered outside the barber shop, freight wagons being loaded and unloaded at various businesses. Sheriff Timmons met them at the edge of town, confirming that his deputies were in position, and that Gregory had been spotted early that morning, emerging from a room he'd rented above the livery stable. "He's been drinking already," the sheriff reported grimly. "Been in and out of the Broken Spoke since they opened, asking questions about the ranch, about when you might come to town." Beatrice felt a chill at the confirmation of Gregory's obsession, but she squared her shoulders. "Then he'll be looking for me." "My men will be watching," Sheriff Timmons assured her. "You just go about your business normally. If O'Malley makes a move, we'll be ready." Their first stop was the general store. As Beatrice browsed fabrics with Isaac nearby, she was conscious of curious glances from other customers. Word of the confrontation at the harvest dance had clearly spread, and her presence with Isaac was now the subject of intense speculation. "Mrs. Henderson is absolutely dying to know why you're shopping for baby things with Isaac Donovan," a familiar voice observed dryly. Beatrice turned to find Sarah Donovan standing behind her, her practical traveling clothes slightly dusty from the road. "Sarah," she exclaimed, genuinely pleased to see the older woman. "You're back from Santa Fe." "Got in last night," Sarah confirmed. "Found my boarding house strangely lacking a certain pregnant assistant. The telegram from my brother explained why." Her sharp eyes took in Beatrice's tense posture and Isaac's vigilant stance nearby. "I see the situation hasn't resolved itself in my absence." Quickly, Isaac explained their plan to draw Gregory into the open. Sarah listened with a frown, clearly disapproving but recognizing the necessity. "It's dangerous," she said when he had finished, "but I understand why you're doing it. And I suppose 3 of us watching for that snake is better than 2. With Sarah now part of their group, they continued their errands around town. By noon, Beatrice was beginning to wonder if Gregory would show himself at all. They decided to take lunch at the small cafe near the town square, choosing a table with a clear view of the street. It was as they were finishing their meal that Beatrice saw him. Gregory stood across the street, partially obscured by a hitching post, watching them with undisguised malevolence. Even from a distance, she could see that he was disheveled, his once immaculate clothing now wrinkled and stained. "He's there," she said quietly, not taking her eyes from the figure. "Across the street." Isaac glanced casually in the direction she indicated, then nodded almost imperceptibly. "I see him. Sheriff's deputy is nearby too. Just act normally." But Gregory had already seen that they'd spotted him. With a deliberate stride that suggested both drunkenness and determination, he began crossing the street toward the cafe. "Here he comes," Sarah murmured, her hand slipping into her handbag where Beatrice knew she carried a small derringer. Beatrice's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression calm as Gregory approached their table. Up close, the changes in him were even more apparent. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot, his once meticulously groomed appearance now slovenly. "Well, well," he said, his voice slurred but venomous. "If it isn't my loving wife enjoying a meal with her new protectors." "Gregory," Beatrice acknowledged coolly, "I'm surprised you're still in Lordsburg. I heard you'd left on the westbound train." His smile was ugly. "Did you really think I'd leave without what's mine?" His gaze dropped meaningfully to her belly. "The baby isn't property, Gregory," Beatrice said firmly. "And neither am I, not anymore." Gregory's face darkened with rage. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you, that's enough," Isaac interrupted, rising from his chair. "You're drunk, O'Malley, and causing a disturbance. I suggest you leave before the sheriff gets involved." Gregory sneered at him. "The high and mighty Isaac Donovan, tell me, did you enjoy taking my leavings? Is that why you've been hiding her out at your ranch? For your own pleasure?" Isaac's jaw tightened, but he maintained his composure. "Mrs. O'Malley has been a guest of my family, nothing more, and she's asked for a divorce which you'd be wise to grant without further trouble." "A divorce?" Gregory laughed harshly. "She's my wife until I say otherwise, and that," he pointed at Beatrice's belly, "is my child. No court in the territory will say different." "The courts might surprise you," Sarah interjected calmly, "especially when they hear how you abandoned her at the depot after beating her. We have Dr. Mitchell's sworn statement about her injuries, and a dozen witnesses who saw your behavior at the harvest dance." Gregory's eyes darted between them, a calculating look replacing his drunken belligerence. "So that's your game," he said slowly. "Turn the law against me. But what if I have a different story to tell? About a faithless wife who ran away with her lover? Who's to say that child is even mine?" Beatrice gasped at the vicious lie, but before she could respond, Gregory continued, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "You think you've won, don't you? But this isn't over. Not by a long shot." With surprising speed for a man in his condition, Gregory reached into his coat and pulled out a revolver. "Gregory, no," Beatrice cried, but he wasn't aiming at her. The gun was pointed directly at Isaac's chest. "I should have done this the night of the dance," Gregory snarled. "Put you down like the interfering dog you are. Everything happened at once." Sarah shouted a warning. Beatrice lunged across the table, trying to knock Gregory's arm aside. The gun went off with a deafening crack. And Isaac, who had been in the process of reaching for his own weapon, staggered backward, a look of shock crossing his face. "Isaac!" Beatrice screamed, horror flooding through her as she saw red blossoming on his shirt. Gregory looked momentarily stunned by what he'd done, but recovery came quickly. He grabbed Beatrice's arm, yanking her roughly toward him. "You're coming with me," he growled. "Now." But Beatrice was beyond fear now, consumed by fury at what Gregory had done. With strength she didn't know she possessed, she twisted in his grasp and brought her knee up sharply between his legs. Gregory doubled over with a howl of pain, the gun dropping from his hand as he clutched it himself. In the next instant, the cafe erupted in chaos. Sheriff Timmons and his deputies burst in, weapons drawn. Sarah was at Isaac's side, pressing a napkin to his bleeding shoulder. And Beatrice, her heart pounding with terror and rage, stood over her fallen husband, looking down at him with a mixture of pity and contempt. "It's over, Gregory," she said quietly. "You've lost." The sheriff and his men quickly subdued Gregory, who continued to curse and threaten even as they dragged him away. Beatrice barely heard him, all her attention focused on Isaac, who was now sitting up with Sarah's support. "How bad is it?" she asked anxiously, kneeling beside him despite her awkward condition. "Just a graze," Isaac assured her, though his face was pale with pain. "Looks worse than it is." "We need to get him to Doc Mitchell," Sarah said practically. "Can you walk, Isaac?" With assistance, Isaac made it to the doctor's office, where Mitchell confirmed that the bullet had indeed only grazed his shoulder, tearing through muscle but missing bone and major blood vessels. "You're a lucky man, Donovan," the doctor said as he cleaned and bandaged the wound. "An inch to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation." Beatrice, who had refused to leave Isaac's side, felt tears of relief sting her eyes. "Thank God," she whispered. Once the wound was dressed, Dr. Mitchell insisted on examining Beatrice as well. "That was quite a shock you had," he explained. "Need to make sure the baby's all right." To everyone's relief, the baby seemed unaffected by the day's events, its heartbeat strong and regular according to the doctor's instruments. "You should rest," he advised Beatrice. No more excitement for a while. Sheriff Timmons arrived as they were preparing to leave the doctor's office. "O'Malley's locked up tight," he reported, "and I've sent for Judge Peterson. He'll be here day after tomorrow for a preliminary hearing." "What are the charges?" Beatrice asked. "Attempted murder, for starters," the sheriff replied grimly. "Plus assault, public drunkenness, and threatening behavior. Judge Peterson doesn't take kindly to men who pull guns in his town. O'Malley's looking at a long stay in territorial prison." The news should have brought relief, but Beatrice felt only a profound weariness. "So it really is over," she said, more to herself than to the others. "It's over," Isaac confirmed, reaching out with his good arm to take her hand. "You're free, Beatrice, or you will be once the divorce is granted." Free. The word echoed in her mind as they made their way back to Sarah's boarding house, where it was decided Beatrice would stay until Isaac's wound healed sufficiently for him to return to the ranch. That evening, as she sat beside Isaac on Sarah's small porch, watching the sun set over Lordsburg, Beatrice allowed herself to truly consider what freedom might mean. No more fear. No more hiding. No more subjugating her own desires and dreams to someone else's demands. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "The future," she admitted. "It feels strange to think I might actually have one now." Isaac's hand found hers in the gathering darkness. "You have more than a future, Beatrice. You have choices. Real ones this time." The simple truth of his words struck her deeply. Choices. After so long feeling trapped, the possibility of directing her own life was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. "Including your offer," she asked softly. "About staying at the ranch." In the dim light, she saw his expression grow serious. "Especially that," he said. "But I want to be clear about something, Beatrice. I'm not asking you to replace one marriage with another or to trade one man's protection for another's. What I'm offering is a partnership. A real one based on mutual respect," and he hesitated, then continued with quiet certainty, "and love. If you'll have it. Love." The word hung between them, honest and unadorned, not a weapon or a chain as it had been with Gregory, but an offering freely given. "I don't know if I remember how to love properly," Beatrice confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, "or if I ever knew." "Then we'll learn together," Isaac said simply. "Day by day, no hurry, no pressure, just two people building something real." The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously, as if in approval of this plan. Beatrice laughed softly, placing her free hand on her belly. "I think someone agrees with you," she said. Isaac's smile was tender. "Smart kid," he observed. "Takes after its mother." In that moment, with the last light fading from the sky and Isaac's warm hand in hers, Beatrice allowed herself to believe that perhaps her story wasn't ending, but just beginning. The days that followed passed in a blur of legal proceedings and preparations. Judge Peterson arrived as promised, holding a preliminary hearing in which Gregory's crimes were laid out in detail. Despite his lawyer's attempts to paint the shooting as an accident and his pursuit of Beatrice as the legitimate concerns of a husband, the judge was unmoved. "The territory of New Mexico may be young," he declared, "but its laws are clear. Violence against women pregnant or otherwise is not tolerated, nor is the attempted murder of respected citizens like Mr. Donovan." Gregory was bound over for trial, with bail set so high there was no possibility of his release. The divorce proceedings were initiated simultaneously, with the lawyer from Santa Fe arriving to represent Beatrice pro bono, just as Isaac had arranged. "Given the circumstances," the lawyer explained, "and Mr. O'Malley's likely incarceration, the divorce should be granted without difficulty. It will take some time for the paperwork to process, but you can consider yourself legally separated as of today." The news brought a profound sense of relief to Beatrice. Though the divorce wouldn't be final for months, the legal separation meant Gregory no longer had any claim to control her life or decisions. Isaac's wound healed quickly under Dr. Mitchell's care and Sarah's vigilant nursing. Within a week, he was able to return to the ranch, though he continued to visit Beatrice daily at the boarding house. Sarah watched their growing closeness with a mixture of approval and concern. "You know, I think the world of you both," she said to Beatrice one evening as they prepared dinner. "But are you sure you're ready for what's developing between you and my brother? After everything you've been through," Beatrice considered the question seriously. "I thought about that myself," she admitted. "Whether I was just trading one dependency for another, but it's different with Isaac. He doesn't try to control me or change me. He really sees me for who I am." Sarah nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. "Good. Because if he ever treated you like Gregory did, I'd shoot him myself, brother or no brother." Beatrice laughed, knowing the threat was only half in jest. "I believe you would, but I don't think you'll need to." "No," Sarah agreed, her expression softening. "I don't think I will either." As November turned to December, bringing cooler weather and the prospect of Christmas, Beatrice found herself settling into a new rhythm of life. She continued to help at the boarding house, but also began assisting at the small school 2 afternoons a week, using her education to tutor children who needed extra help. The work was rewarding, confirming her old desire to teach. When the current schoolmistress mentioned she was considering returning east in the spring, Beatrice felt a flutter of excitement at the possibility of taking her place. Isaac supported her interest wholeheartedly. "You'd be a wonderful teacher," he told her. "And Lordsburg needs good teachers badly. The children would be lucky to have you." His unwavering belief in her abilities continued to heal something deep within Beatrice, the part of her that Gregory had systematically tried to destroy, the sense that she was capable and worthy of respect. As Christmas approached, Isaac invited Beatrice and Sarah to spend the holiday at the ranch. "Elena is already planning the feast," he said, "and the house feels too empty without you there." The casual admission that he had grown accustomed to her presence in his home during her brief stay warmed Beatrice more than she could express. They arrived at the Rocking D on Christmas Eve, the wagon loaded with gifts and supplies for the celebration. The ranch house had been decorated with pine boughs and red ribbons, giving it a festive air that Beatrice hadn't expected from the bachelor establishment. "Elena's doing," Isaac explained when he saw her admiring the decorations. "She insists on maintaining traditions, even when it was just me here." The housekeeper had prepared a magnificent dinner, featuring traditional dishes from her Mexican heritage alongside more conventional American fare. As they ate by candlelight, sharing stories and laughter, Beatrice felt a sense of belonging she had thought lost forever. Later, after Sarah and Alina had retired for the night, Beatrice and Isaac sat before the fire in the main room, enjoying a moment of peaceful solitude. "I have something for you," Isaac said, reaching into his pocket. "An early Christmas gift." He handed her a small, carefully wrapped package. Beatrice opened it to find a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. "Oh, Isaac," she breathed, "it's beautiful." "Open it," he encouraged softly. Inside the locket was a tiny scrap of paper with a single word written in Isaac's neat hand. "Home." "I want you to know," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "that whatever you decide about your future, whether you stay in Lordsburg as a teacher or move on to somewhere else, or—" he paused, "or choose to make your life here with me, you always have a home, a place where you belong, just as you are." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes at the simple, profound gift, not a demand or an obligation, but a promise of acceptance and safety that asked nothing in return. "I don't deserve you," she whispered. Isaac shook his head. "It's not about deserving, Beatrice. It's about choosing. And I choose you and your child if you'll have me." The baby kicked then, as if lending its own voice to the conversation. Beatrice laughed through her tears, taking Isaac's hand and placing it on her belly so he could feel the movement. "I think we both choose you," she said, her voice steady and sure. "If you'll have us." Isaac's answer was in his eyes, warm and full of promise, before he leaned in to place a gentle kiss on her lips, their first, but far from their last. Christmas Day dawned clear and cold, a perfect winter morning in the New Mexico territory. Beatrice woke early, her hand automatically going to the silver locket she had worn to bed. The word inside it, "home," resonated in her heart as she dressed and made her way to the main room of the ranch house. She found Isaac already awake, building up the fire against the morning chill. He turned at her approach, his face lighting with a smile that made her heart skip. "Merry Christmas," he greeted her, crossing the room to take her hands in his. "Merry Christmas," she replied, rising on tiptoe to place a kiss on his cheek. The casual intimacy of the gesture felt right, as if they had been sharing such moments for years rather than hours. Sarah and Alina joined them soon after, and the day unfolded in a pleasant blur of gift-giving, feasting, and conversation. In the afternoon, several of the ranch hands and their families came to the main house for dinner and simple entertainment. Music played on a battered fiddle, stories shared around the table, children running excitedly with their new toys. Beatrice, watching it all from a comfortable chair near the fire, felt a deep contentment settle over her. This was what she had always imagined a family should be: not perfect or without disagreements, but fundamentally kind, supportive, and genuine. Isaac came to sit beside her, handing her a cup of hot cider. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his eyes concerned. "Not too tired, a little," she admitted, "but in the best possible way." He nodded, understanding, his gaze drifting to her rounded belly. "Not much longer now," he observed. 6 weeks or so, according to Dr. Mitchell, Beatrice confirmed, "though he says first babies often come a bit late." A thoughtful expression crossed Isaac's face. "We should talk about arrangements," he said, "for when the time comes." Beatrice felt a flutter of anxiety. "Arrangements?" Isaac seemed to sense her concern. "Nothing complicated," he assured her, "just practical matters. Where you'll stay, who'll help with the birth. Sarah's offered her place, of course, but—" He hesitated, then continued carefully, "I was hoping you might consider staying here. Alina's delivered more babies than most midwives, and the room next to yours could be set up as a nursery." The implication wasn't lost on Beatrice. Isaac wasn't just offering temporary shelter for her confinement. He was suggesting a permanent arrangement, a home for her and her child. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "Taking on a woman with another man's child. People will talk, Isaac." His expression was resolute. "Let them. I've never much cared what people say, and I'm too old to start now." He took her hand gently. "All I care about is what you want, Beatrice. What will make you happy?" Happiness. It had been so long since she'd considered her own happiness as a valid concern that the concept felt almost foreign. Yet here was Isaac, placing it at the center of their decision. "I want to be here," she said finally, the truth of it resonating deep within her. "With you. Not because it's practical or safe, though it is both of those things, but because when I'm with you I feel like myself again. The self I was meant to be." Isaac's expression softened with such tenderness that Beatrice felt tears spring to her eyes. "Then it's settled," he said simply. "You'll stay." Later that night, after the guests had departed and the household had settled into quiet, Beatrice sat on the edge of her bed, reflecting on the day's events and the decision she had made. It wasn't the future she had imagined for herself when she left Ohio with Gregory, but it was, she realized, the future she wanted now. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Beatrice," Isaac's voice called quietly, "may I come in?" "Of course," she replied, smoothing her dressing gown over her nightdress. Isaac entered, still dressed but with his collar open in a way that spoke of the day's relaxed atmosphere. He carried a small wooden box, which he set down carefully on the bedside table before sitting beside her on the bed. "I have one more gift for you," he said, "something I've been saving for the right moment." Beatrice looked at the box curiously. "You've already given me so much, Isaac." "This is different," he explained, opening the box to reveal a simple gold band. "It was my mother's wedding ring. Before she died, she made me promise to give it only to a woman I truly loved, someone who would understand its value went beyond the gold it's made of." Beatrice's breath caught as Isaac took the ring from its velvet nest. "I'm not asking you to wear it now," he continued. "Not until you're ready, until your divorce is final and you're truly free to choose. But I want you to have it, to know that whenever you're ready, I'm ready too." The gesture overwhelmed Beatrice with its thoughtfulness. No pressure, no demands, just the quiet assurance of his feelings and his respect for her situation. "May I?" she asked, holding out her hand. Isaac placed the ring in her palm, where it caught the lamplight with a warm glow. It was a simple band, worn smooth by years of wear, yet more beautiful to Beatrice than the most elaborate diamond. "I'll keep it safe," she promised, closing her fingers around it, "until the day I can wear it proudly." Isaac's smile was worth every hardship she had endured to reach this moment. "That's all I ask," he said softly. The weeks that followed settled into a comfortable routine. Beatrice moved permanently to the ranch, setting up the nursery with help from Sarah and Alina. Isaac insisted on ordering a proper crib from Santa Fe, along with other necessities for the baby. His enthusiasm for these preparations touched Beatrice deeply. "You don't have to do all this," she protested when yet another package arrived from town. "The baby won't know the difference between store-bought blankets and homemade ones." "Maybe not," Isaac agreed, "but you will. And I want you both to have the best." As January progressed, Beatrice's condition made travel increasingly difficult. Isaac arranged for Dr. Mitchell to visit the ranch weekly, ensuring that both mother and baby remained healthy. "Everything looks excellent," the doctor reported after one such visit in late January. "The baby's positioned correctly and you're in good health, Mrs. O'Malley." "Miss O'Malley," Beatrice corrected gently. "The divorce was finalized yesterday." The news had arrived by telegram that morning, a brief message from the lawyer in Santa Fe confirming that the territorial court had granted her petition for divorce. Gregory, serving his sentence for attempted murder, had not contested it. "Miss O'Malley, then," the doctor amended with a smile. "My congratulations on both your health and your freedom." That evening, after the doctor had departed, Beatrice found Isaac in his study. He looked up from his ledgers when she entered, his face lighting with the smile that never failed to warm her heart. "How are you feeling?" he asked, rising to guide her to a comfortable chair. "Free," she replied simply, "and a bit overwhelmed by it all." Isaac nodded, understanding. "Freedom can be daunting when you're not used to it." "It's not just that," Beatrice admitted. "It's knowing that soon there will be a child depending on me, a new life that I'm responsible for shaping." She hesitated, then added quietly, "I want to do better than my parents did, than Gregory did. I want my child to know love without conditions." "You will," Isaac assured her, his faith in her evident. "And you won't be doing it alone." The reminder of his presence, his unwavering support, steadied Beatrice as nothing else could. Reaching into her pocket, she withdrew the gold band he had given her at Christmas. "I've been keeping this close," she said, holding it out to him. "Waiting for the day I could wear it," understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes. "And now that day has come," Beatrice nodded, her heart full. "If the offer still stands." In answer, Isaac took the ring from her palm and with gentle reverence slipped it onto the third finger of her left hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her all along. "It seems your mother approves," Beatrice said softly, admiring the way the gold caught the lamplight. "She would have loved you," Isaac replied, his voice husky with emotion. "Almost as much as I do." The simple declaration, spoken without fanfare or elaborate promises, meant more to Beatrice than all of Gregory's flowery courtship had. This was real as the child growing beneath her heart, as real as the ranch around them, as real as the man kneeling before her now. "I love you too," she whispered, the words coming easily now that she was free to speak them. "More than I thought possible." Their kiss was gentle but profound, a promise sealed not with passionate declarations but with the quiet certainty of two people who had found in each other something worth building a life around. 2 weeks later, in the early hours of a February morning, Beatrice was awakened by a familiar pain that quickly grew in intensity. She lay still for a moment, counting the minutes between contractions, before waking Isaac with a touch on his shoulder. "It's time," she said simply. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of pain and determination. Alina proved her worth 100 times over, her experienced hands and calm voice guiding Beatrice through the most difficult moments. Isaac remained nearby throughout, providing water, support, and unwavering encouragement. "You're doing beautifully," he assured her during a particularly difficult contraction. "The strongest woman I've ever known." In the end, it was Isaac's steady presence as much as Alina's skilled assistance that saw Beatrice through the ordeal. As the winter sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ranch, her son was born with a lusty cry that announced his arrival to the world. "A boy," Alina declared proudly, wrapping the infant in a soft blanket before placing him in his mother's arms. "Strong and healthy." Beatrice gazed down at her son in wonder. He had a shock of dark hair, and when he briefly opened his eyes, she caught a glimpse of deep blue that might lighten with time. "He's perfect," she breathed. Isaac, who had been watching from a respectful distance, approached the bed cautiously. "He is," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mother." Beatrice looked up at the man who had changed her life so completely. "Would you like to hold your son?" she asked quietly. Isaac's eyes widened at the implication of her words. "Are you sure?" In answer, Beatrice held out the bundled infant. "I've never been more sure of anything," she said. "He may not have your blood, but he will have your name and your love, if you'll give them." With careful reverence, Isaac took the baby in his arms. The child, as if sensing the significance of the moment, quieted his fussing and gazed up at the man who would be his father. "Hello, little one," Isaac whispered. "Welcome to the world. Welcome to our family." The word family hung in the air between them, rich with promise and possibility. Not the broken family of Beatrice's childhood or the sham of her first marriage, but something real and whole. "What will you call him?" Isaac asked, returning the now sleeping infant to Beatrice's arms. She had thought long about this, wanting a name that would honor the new life they were building rather than the past they had overcome. "Matthew," she decided. "It means gift from God, because that's what he is, what you both are." Isaac's smile was tender as he sat on the edge of the bed, creating a circle with his arms that enclosed both Beatrice and the child. "Matthew Donovan," he tested the name. "It has a good sound to it." "It does," Beatrice agreed, leaning into his strength. "A very good sound." In the weeks and months that followed, the small family settled into a rhythm of life that brought joy to all involved. Matthew proved to be a good-natured baby, thriving under the care of his mother and the adoration of his adoptive father. Isaac and Beatrice were married in a simple ceremony at the ranch that spring, with Sarah standing as witness and Alina providing a feast that became the talk of the territory. Judge Peterson himself officiated, his usually stern countenance softened by the evident happiness of the couple before him. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of New Mexico," he proclaimed, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The words, so formal and yet so profoundly meaningful, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Beatrice's life, one written not by circumstance or the demands of others, but by her own choices and the love she had found when she least expected it. As the years passed, the Rocking D Ranch flourished under the combined efforts of Isaac and Beatrice. The schoolhouse in Lordsburg gained a dedicated teacher in Beatrice, who divided her time between educating the town's children and raising her growing family. Matthew was joined by a sister, Sarah Alina, born 2 years after their marriage, and later by a brother, James Isaac, completing their family. Gregory O'Malley served his full sentence for attempted murder, then disappeared from the territory, never to trouble them again. Beatrice occasionally thought of him, not with fear or hatred, but with a kind of detached pity for a man who had never understood that love couldn't be forced or controlled. On the 5th anniversary of their meeting at the depot, Isaac surprised Beatrice with a special gift, the deed to a small plot of land near the creek, where he had built her the garden she had once dreamed of having. "For the woman who brought life and beauty to this ranch," he said, as he led her blindfolded to the spot. "A place that's entirely yours." Beatrice stood in wonder, taking in the carefully prepared beds, the small greenhouse for starting seedlings, the bench placed perfectly to catch the morning sun. It was more than just a garden. It was a symbol of how far she had come from that desperate night at the Lordsburg depot. "Do you remember what you told me that first day we walked together in town?" Isaac asked as they sat on the bench, watching Matthew and Sarah Alina play nearby while baby James slept in his mother's arms. "About beauty and hardship going hand in hand." Beatrice nodded, remembering the conversation that seemed a lifetime ago. "I still believe that," she said, "perhaps more now than ever." Isaac's arm tightened around her shoulders. "You were right," he said simply, "about that and so many other things." Gazing out at the ranch that had become her home, at the children who filled her days with joy and challenges in equal measure, at the man beside her whose quiet strength had never faltered, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she had once thought impossible: a life built on genuine love, mutual respect, and the freedom to be fully herself. "We've been blessed," she said softly, "beyond anything I could have imagined that night at the depot." "We have," Isaac agreed, "and the best is yet to come." As the sun began to set over the New Mexico landscape, painting the distant mountains in shades of gold and purple, Beatrice Donovan leaned into her husband's embrace, secure in the knowledge that whatever hardships the future might bring, they would face them together, not as savior and saved, but as equal partners in the life they had built from the ashes of broken dreams. And in the end, that was the greatest blessing of all.